So here's the quote. NFLPA is working to finalize a proposal to overhaul the offseason starting as soon as 2025, eliminating voluntary on-field work in spring in favor of a longer training camp ramp-up, with players reporting in mid-June to early July. NFL insider Tom Pelissaro reported Tuesday per sources informed of the plan. Keywords there. Eliminating voluntary on-field work. Okay, so why is that important? In the offseason, your head coach is going to say, hey, offseason program starts April 1 and it goes until June 17, let's say. And here are our OTAs, here's our mini camps, here's the voluntary, here's the stuff we want you have to be at. If you're not there, depending on the program, if you're not there, because the coaches have hours during the day, they can classroom, they can work with you on the field. So if you're not there, like the coaches don't care if you're working out somewhere else. Everybody prefer you to see what you're doing. It's always nice to be able to stick your head into the weight room and see if a guy's working out. But as far as being able to work with them, if they're not allowed to work with the players, then the head coach isn't going to really care if they're in Green Bay, if they're in South Florida, because in South Florida, they have the House of Athlete and a bunch of Bomberinos and all that, where you can work out with all of these different athletes from all over the country and really get, very, very high-end training that is specific to you. You might not be able to necessarily get that at the facility, only because if there's 100 guys in the weight room and there's 4 to 5 strength coaches plus interns, that's really tough to manage each individual player. Like, what do you need the most? So we've kind of gone through that before, but this is interesting because the only way to get rid of that pull, like the players feel obligated to show up because it could affect their contract talks. For some of the players, it could affect whether or not they make the team. Like I remember John Fox was very adamant that he didn't want players that weren't in the offseason program to be captains on his teams, which affected me, by the way. So a lot of this stuff, they need to write it in and we're not going to be part of this at all. Otherwise, there'll still be that pressure coming in. They've been talking about this for decades. Why not have a longer offseason and then have a ramp-up period that is more suiting to the rigors of an NFL season? Like, in other words, why take 2 months off between June and the end of July, or a month and a half off, instead of using that as a ramp-up period to actually be ready for the season? Here's kind of the weird thing that's going on right now. Many of you undoubtedly are going to wonder why the NFLPA would bring up something like this to the negotiating table right now, knowing full well that Roger Goodell and his company want to extend the season by another game to the 18th season. Like, why would you put a negotiating chip on the table that this would not be a like-for-like deal? So if they said, okay, like if you went to the owners today and said, hey, we'll give you an 18th game, but you got to give us back this offseason from April 1 to, let's say, June 20th, we don't want to be in the building anymore. They'd go, okay, deal. Because they don't care at all. Here's the problem. Let me explain the problem with an 18-game season. Even the 17-game season they have right now, plus an added playoff game. And I'm not talking about for the fans, because I'm sure the fans want all the content they can grab, and I understand that. But think about it from an athlete perspective, and think about it from a quality of play perspective, because I think at some level you got to start caring about that as well. There is a risk-reward scale that you generally live by, okay? And just like it, and I could liken it to how stupid this camera is that sometimes goes out. What's the risk for me to go buy another one that it works just as poorly as the last two? I don't know. But there's a risk reward scale you generally live by. Like, for example, if I want to go cliff diving, I want the reward of the exhilaration of going cliff diving. I don't want to risk that I belly flop and get sick for the next 2 days. If I want to ride a bull, I'm also might be afraid of what happens when he starts bucking. So we do these things that are really exciting where we want to, but we don't know if the reward's worth the risk. Professional athletes at every level are always battling with that risk reward. And I think for, a lot of the guys, the reasons that they're successful, men and women, are because they can kind of tamper or lower the or change the profile of the risk reward in their mind, like maybe more so than the general population. Athletes are getting paid in part because they're willing to do stuff that other people aren't willing to do. Like boxing Mike Tyson, or, going up on a half pipe and trying to pull a 1080 on a skateboard most people aren't going to go, you know what? I'm going to train. I'm willing to put myself through the training for 4 to 6 months that it takes to do either one of those things. Oh, and then I actually got to go do it in front of a million people, especially like the boxing thing, 2-man enter, 1-man leave deal. You don't, that goes against the risk reward profile of the general population. And that's why, in part, we love to watch athletes because they're willing to do things we're not willing to do, or they're able to do things we're not willing to do. Football players are now making more money than I think anyone ever thought they would. And I think that's a fantastic deal. But we've talked about it before, that the high-priced guys now are making maybe 5x of what they used to make, like 20 years ago. Not that long ago. I'm talking about the highest paid guys in the league are making somewhere between, 4 and 5 times what they used to make, 20, 25 years ago. And with that extra income, because that's, you think about that versus like, a teacher's salary, a banker's salary, almost any other profession, the risk profile changes because that's gone up so much more than everything else. So the amount of money that would be generated and sent directly to every player's pocketbook, if they added an 18th game, is not going to justify the additional wear and tear, the additional risk of playing one extra game plus potentially an extra playoff game. For quarterbacks, that might be worth it because their risk profile is different. They don't get hit as much, blah, blah, blah. I mean, it's not a violent, kickers, quarterbacks, it's not a violent part of the sport. But you start talking about anybody who's involved in actual confrontation, that risk reward profile doesn't make really any sense. And then you'll also hear about guys saying, and depending on who you are, where's that extra money go? Well, it goes to the top paid guys. It doesn't go to like league minimum is probably not going to change because they changed this one rule or add an 18th game. It might change a little bit, but that money is really going to go somewhere else. So for a lineman, running back, or a safety, it's the extra games don't add up to extra seasons. So you're running out of rope come the end of the regular season now as it is. Like by 17th week, I guess it's week 18 now. If you're exhausted already, physically you're beat up, you're taped together at some part of your joints. And the idea of adding an extra game so you can make kind of a marginal amount more in your weekly check versus playing another couple extra seasons. Like it's not the cumulative effect that one game's going to have over 12 years. It's the cumulative effect that an 18th game would have over that season in particular. Now, it does have a cumulative effect over the course of your career, but you just like at, your start week 1, training camp's the last day you feel nice, feel good about yourself, feel like physically. Week 1, you're okay. Week 5, you're hurt. Week 8, you're tired. Week 12, you feel like, dog crap. Week 17, you're hoping that you're in the playoffs. Otherwise, you're ready to be done. Now there's an 18th game. More people get hurt. So if you are potentially eliminating, or reducing the profile of my career, because guys now want to play longer guys now would rather play longer at 80% than having a shorter career at like 90, 95%, because the money's just so different now. Like the profile changes. So what do? Do you risk, reducing your career from like 12 years to 8 years so you can play one extra game? Doesn't make any sense for the players. It makes a lot of sense for the fans. Makes a lot of sense for the owners who have zero risk profile here. It makes no sense for the player. So just put it in perspective this way. If you're a veteran player who's a good player, you're probably making somewhere between non-quarterbacks, $10 to $25 million a year. What could possibly be important enough, or what amount of money would be enough to go, I'm going to add a game and potentially lose a season or 2 seasons or 3 seasons? Because the more games you play, the more games you have to get through, the greater the chance you getting injured. So why put this on the table now? And I think there's 3 reasons. Number 1, and this is what you hopefully the Nflpa is saying, listen, this is off the table as far as concessions for a 19th game. Now, the Nflpa has used time at the facility before as a bargaining chip for when they were revenue share. When they lost in revenue share, they're like, oh, we want our, we don't want our centers to have to touch a football for 2 months, or we don't have, we don't want to do X, Y, and Z. So that was like the DeMaurice Smith, that group, Jeff Saturday, that was that group that negotiating time in the building for like potential revenue share issues. I think that the new NFLPA director, Lloyd Howell Jr., I think he's going to not make the same mistake that D. Smith made. I just repeatedly made, I should say. Like, I don't think that's it. So I think that's off the table, number one. Number two, this is being presented as a longer off season paired with a longer ramp up period to the actual season. So from a training perspective, this could actually make way more sense. I'll quickly explain why. Right now, you get to the end of the offseason program. It's like June 17th. And then every player is in as good a shape as they're going to get as far as the team's concerned. They've been training for, 8 to 12 weeks, running 8 to 12 weeks, light field work for 8 to 12 weeks as far as like not in pads. So there's a level of physicality you can't reach. So most guys, like most coaches are probably going like, man, I really feel good about the way Mike looks on June 17th. Let's just hope that wherever he goes after this, and for the month and a half that he's gone, that he comes back in better shape, or at least as good shape as he's in right now. But a lot of guys, even still, aren't using that time in a manner that would be fortuitous for them to maximize their abilities come July, August, September, October, etc. So that gap period, a lot of guys get detrained because unless you're doing football stuff, it's hard to do football stuff. Like unless you're with the group, it's hard. So you can get in great shape, you can get stronger, you can get faster. But as far as like being able to go out and maybe work on some of your technique, or doing some team stuff, as far as bringing everybody together from a team perspective, and to some extent from a player perspective, I understand why you would want to have a longer ramp up period. And we discussed this all the time back in Miami. Have a longer ramp up period and give them 4 months, if that's what they want, of time off, February, March, April, May. Give them 4 months off and let them go to their private facilities and go train. Because from a coaching perspective, you're going to get, it's like you're starting training camp mentally, 4 to 6 weeks earlier. So you're going to get that many more reps in that actually matter. They're not going to forget all that information. So I think that makes a ton of sense from a team perspective. And that is where I think the NFLPA understands, well, the players aren't going to mind this because you're probably reducing the actual time in the building. Like if they start mid-June, early July, then it's only really another, what are we talking, 3-4 weeks, really? Versus like 8 to 12 that they're doing right now. And the team is going to probably say, you know what? I'd rather have that 4 weeks pre-training camp to make sure we're good on all our schemes. Especially think about the Packers right now installing new defense. Is it easier for Hafley to go in and install for 4 or 5 weeks, 3 to 4 to 5 weeks, right before training camp starts, and then hit the ground running? Or is it smarter to install right now, stop June 17th, take a month and a half off where he doesn't see anybody, and then have to reinstall that all over again? Like, it's simple math, right? So if the NFL is smart, they'll use that as this is what you guys actually want from a coaching perspective. And then two, if they're smart, putting this in place, this idea could have long-term benefits when it comes to lengthening the season. Because if you get January until June off, February till June off, 2 months after they do now, they come back for preseason work in June, 1 week off for the 4th of July, 2 more weeks they roll into training camp. And we know training camp's shortened than years past. This puts the season, like how long am I at the building? I'm in the building from June until February, if things go well. International soccer, for example, is like a 10-month season, okay? I know the wear and tear is certainly different in football than it is in soccer. It would be difficult to ask a football player to spend more than 8 months playing in a row playing football. So in other words, I think the NFLPA could also be looking at this and saying, we'll come in for a month and a half of ramp up, but then there's no way we're extending, because I'm not going to start in June and then you're going to ask me to finish later in February. Like every week now is just another week that we're in the building, banging our heads against one another, all of that. And you're like, well, Mike, they're already doing this time. Yeah, but it's not consecutive. Like they don't get a break. And that's always been the argument from players, I think, before now is like, we need that break to like recharge our batteries. And I think you'd use that Fourth of July week to do that. We need that break to recharge our batteries so we can go in and give this our all. But I think what they're figuring out is players understand that some of the best training they're going to get is outside of the organization. They're going to go to their private facilities, they're going to go back to their colleges. They're going to get a little bit more personalized training. They're going to go work with other guys in the league, work on their very, very specific technical skill, learning how to watch all the tape, learning how to read different defenders, all that stuff that you learn when you're with your peer group. They're gonna go continue to go do that, and they're gonna spend more time doing that. They're gonna have they're gonna have kind of a better schedule to do that because they don't have to, they do that for February through June, and then they go, okay, now we're done for this off. Now the season starts really in June. Let's go do this ramp up period. Yeah, we're not going full speed, but we're going to be in the classroom every day. We're going to be training. We're going to do all this stuff. So I think that would help on so many levels, the NFLPA. I think it would help players on so many levels. It's a little bit daunting to think about getting rid of that summertime and adding kind of a 6-week or 5 to 6 week profile of training with the team right before. But you see the benefits from a mental standpoint of not having to reinstall that scheme twice.